Got this story this evening from a long-time listener. I want to thank him for sending me this story. I am a 35-year-old dentist. I live and work in one of the northern suburbs of Atlanta. My now ex-girlfriend is 24 and was working part-time for a law firm in her hometown. At first, Clarissa was wonderful. She had the keys to my home and would come to cook my dinner almost every day. Then sleep over several nights a week. I in turn made sure to take her out several nights a week for almost a year. I was happy and I think she was too. Then over time I started to notice Clarissa had stopped cooking. I asked her about it and she said the firm wanted her to stay longer. In the afternoon, I accepted this and made my own dinner and still took Clarissa out like I used to. I also started to notice a dead bedroom. I really did not have time to get to the bottom of things because I had to travel to another state for Naval Reserve duty. I was going to be going for almost a month. The Navy keeps us busy during these periods. But I was still noticing Clarissa was distant. Later, I spoke to my mom and she told me she thinks she saw Clarissa's car in a part of town that I did not know she had any friends. By this time, I was bothered by Clarissa's actions and was planning to confront her when I got back home. The almost 10-hour drive, my mind was racing about things. I had already bought a ring and was planning to ask Clarissa to marry me for the first time since I became a dentist. I had paid off my student debt and was financially able to take care of Clarissa. Clarissa had it all. She was drop dead beautiful and learned to cook from her mother and grandmother. Clarissa also made me feel like a man when we were together. But based on her actions over the last several months, I had a small misgiving about her. So I decided not to propose to her and put the ring in my safe deposit box at the bank. I returned home and went back to work, still had a dead bedroom and Clarissa might cook my dinner one day a week. During this bad time in my life, one of my cousins broke up with his girl after catching her tongue deep in another man's throat. He came over to my house and we talked about things until late in the night. I did ask him if he would consider taking her back. He said if a kiss was all she did, he might. However, in the conversations they later had, she had basically given up all her body to this man and they were done. He then went on to say she admitted to kissing him after having sex with this man and not cleaning herself. He was 100% done with her and there was no going back. I was of this mindset when I spoke to a good friend of my father who works as a consultant and helps men going through bad breakups and divorces. The first thing he asked me was on a scale of 1 to 10. How much she has to change? And was it a gradual change or did it happen? All of a sudden as I spoke to him, he would say red flag. It seemed like he used that term red flag many times as we talked. What he said as we stopped talking still haunts me to this day. He said, by the time you start to notice red flags, you have already lost her. Most of the time the relationship is over. You just are the last to get the message. I gave some serious thought to hiring a private investigator but wanted to do one thing. First, I went to visit my folks and asked my mom where she had seen Clarissa's car that day. So she and I got in my car and she showed the house to me. I went home and thought about that house over the next several weeks. I drove by the house a lot all different times until one Monday morning, about 4 in the morning, I seen the car next to a Dodge pickup in the driveway. I went to a local Waffle House and had some coffee and waited until 6 a.m. The house had a lot of pine trees on one side of the driveway that went almost all the way to the road. I parked my car and walked very close to the driveway. I stood there behind a tree, sipping coffee for a while waiting for her to come out. Finally, she did. I watched her and the other man hug and kiss as I walked out to a position directly behind her car. As she turned around to walk away, she saw me standing there. I just stayed quiet and then started walking back to my car. Clarissa was following me screaming. I did not understand and to stop walking. The man followed her for a bit but went back home. I never really said a word. Clarissa attempted to block me in with her body, but because I could go forward or backward, she stopped crying and fell down crying. As I drove away, As this was a work day for me, I went home and got a shower. When I came out, Clarissa was sitting at my table sobbing, still was not accepting. I was done with her. By this time, I really needed to get out so I could go to work as my waiting room. By this time, had my first patient of the day. I also called my father to come to my home to get Clarissa out and change my locks. Later that morning, one of my girls had to call the cops to get Clarissa out of my office. I was also making mistakes. So I had my receptionist call my scheduled patients that day and have them come back at a later date. I also canceled all my appointments. The next day, I drove up to a friend's cabin on Lake Burton and spent several days. My dad brought me some food and a 6-pack of beer and we sat and talked. He told me that Clarissa was not doing well. Her parents are confused and her mom had spoken to my mom trying to find out what happened many times during that Lake Burton stay. I cried over a lost love, cried over what I thought would be a wonderful life. I did finally find my last tear for her. Fast forward about a month. Clarissa finally stopped attempting to contact me. I was also giving some serious thought to giving up my practice and going on active duty in the U.S. Navy. Then one day I heard a knock on my door. It was the man I found Clarissa with that morning. He asked me, could he come in? I shook my head and asked him to leave my property. He did as I asked but said, he was sorry that happened. But he did not know Clarissa was in a relationship. I let it go and watched him drive away. Then later, I was asked if I had time to speak to a man in my office. I said yes and walked into my waiting room to find Clarissa's father there. She still has not told her folks what she did. He was still angry at me. I stayed calm and told him I found her in the act of cheating. His demeanor went from anger to tears dripping down his cheeks. It took about 2 more months, but I finally learned just who that man was. He was Clarissa's first boyfriend and her first lover. After high school, he left Georgia and moved to Florida for several years. Then returned to his hometown and ran into Clarissa. Clarissa knew he was a loser but was drawn to him. So now she has lost everything. I gave some thought to that expensive ring in my safe deposit box at the bank. I was able to get all my money back short, a small restocking fee. I will use that money to pay for an upcoming trip to see some friends that I know who are stationed at Pearl Harbor. I have also been watching a lot of YouTube content I am learning about, but no, that is not for me. I am still looking for that right girl. I have not yet hit my prime, so I have lots of time yet. I rarely hear anything these days about Clarissa. What I have heard is she is on some meds. Clarissa is a very beautiful girl. There are times when I have to stop myself from calling her. I know she is not trustworthy. And to be honest, I feel for the next